Melty Blood is a fighting game about Japanese high schoolers beating up vampires. So, that's good enough for a Halloween-themed review, right? Yeah, I'm gonna say it's close enough. I remember when Type Lumina was first released, it got a lot of criticism around how stupid its shield mechanic was, and I got the general impression that it didn't seem like a very fun game to play. Well, it got a lot of balance updates and changes over time, and now that I've finally gone ahead and given it a solid chance for myself, I'm pleasantly surprised. It's not exactly my kind of game, and I can definitely see the problems that people might have with it, but it is pretty good and quite a bit of fun. It etches out a unique subgenre for itself, and it might be the right kind of fighting game for those who have tried and failed to get into anything else. The story of Melty Blood? Well, I'd say it's poorly told in this game. For those unaware, the series originally started as a visual novel called Tsukahime, and soon afterwards, the developers then made Melty Blood, a sequel of sorts as a fighting game, and both Tsukahime and Melty Blood would continue to develop as separate and interlinked series. You can see this inspiration of the source material in Type Lumina's story mode, as it's presented very much like a traditional visual novel. So, with all that said, what's the actual story here? It's honestly hard to say. Many of these stories are only tangentially related, and you'll need to play through quite a few of them just to begin to grasp the general world that is Melty Blood and Tsukahime. The best I can figure is that Arcuid is the main character, and despite being a vampire, she's not quite as evil as most of her kind. She reluctantly teams up with her rival, a vampire hunter named CL, to take down the greater evils of the world. Meanwhile, Shiki is in the center of a love triangle between Arcuid and CL, and other members of his family also play important roles, like Shiki's younger sister Akiha, his household's two insane maids, and his adoptive younger sister Miyako. Then there's some side characters who fit in some way or another, as well as some crossover characters from the anime series Fate. Anyway, while you do get a general overview of all the characters, their personalities, their motivations, you don't really get a feeling of anything actually happening in the story. There's not much in terms of a central plot to follow. In fact, Volv is kind of portrayed as the main antagonist, and he's the final boss for most of the character stories, but you never learn that much about him, and he doesn't actually seem like that big of a threat. Michael Roa, on the other hand, is way more important to the plot, and in general, a way more important antagonist. The mood and themes of these stories also vary greatly as well. Some of them are humorous and absurd, while others are much more serious and dark. Hey, I did say this is a Halloween review. It's just very strange. While there is a general collection of short stories to go through, it's hard to say how much value it really has. Most of these feel a lot closer to how a story is told in a traditional fighting game's arcade mode, which, as you probably know, usually doesn't amount to much. And it's a little bit disappointing considering the franchise's roots as a story-driven visual novel that this is all we get. As a comparison, Persona 4 Arena did a much better job at telling a story with multiple characters, and it even did so in a visual novel kind of way. That being said, some of these stories are directly related to each other, and in the strangest ways. For whatever odd reason, Miyako and Neko arc come across as the main characters in this game. Miyako's main story, and I'd say the story with the most plot in this game, actually continues after a false ending of her initial story, in which she's searching for her beloved stepbrother who has recently left her life. Neko arc tags along as a bumbling antagonist of sorts, and explains why certain things are happening the way that they do, while breaking the fourth wall constantly. This part of the story is actually really great, and it has a real plot to follow, as stupid as it may be, but it is pretty funny and it pokes fun at the visual novel genre in some clever ways. I really wish this got its own dedicated section in the game's menu rather than being buried among all these story modes, and that it got expanded upon more and turned into a bigger plot. As it is, you have to play through all of these individual character stories to unlock the full plot, but half of them are unrelated anyways, while the best ones feel like they could have been expanded upon more. Anyway, the story doesn't really matter in a fighting game, so moving on with the rest of the presentation. Probably the most hilarious and outstanding thing about Melty Blood is how bland most of the character designs are. This isn't directly a criticism, but hear me out. You have two generic-looking high school students, a couple of maids, a young woman, the same young woman in a longer skirt, an older dude in a kung fu outfit, and a little girl in a kung fu outfit. Both of these characters are completely unrelated, by the way. Oh yeah, my favorite. This character's design is nondescript t-shirt and jeans, but she's literally a magician who shoots laser blasts out of her hands. It's so ridiculous. Half the characters look like completely normal people, while the other half are way more extravagant, especially the crossover characters from Fate. They don't look like they belong here at all. I also want to mention that for a series about vampires, there aren't that many in this game. There's only 4 of them if you don't count Arcued twice. Although it sounds like I'm complaining, I'm surprised that I don't mind that much. In a weird way, by being so generic and unassuming with its character designs, Melty Blood manages to form a unique identity of its own. I kind of like it. If you're off-put by how bland the game looks, I'd encourage you to give it a try. It might grow on you. The background stages are nice, but nothing amazing. They're all modeled in 3D, which really makes them stand out against the pixelated characters. It's weird at first because it feels inconsistent, but I did end up liking it. Much like the character designs, the stages range from 2 extremes, either bland and normal or totally fantastical, and there's not much in between. The music is similar in this regard. A couple of tracks stand out as pretty cool, with Mysterious Dusk being a personal favorite of mine, but none of it's too big of a deal and there's not much of a central theme. It's kind of all over the place. Still, it works well as background audio that's nice to listen to while beating up your opponent. As a bonus, it seems like all the music from the previous Melty Blood games are in as well. Like I just mentioned, the characters are done in a traditional pixel art style, and it looks really good. Arguably, King of Fighters 13 might have the best looking pixel art of all time, at least for a fighting game, but Type Lumina is no slouch either. Something that's particularly impressive are the customization options, allowing for a wide array of colors to design your own look. There are some limitations, but this feature is really awesome, and it's even reflected in the super move animations, although the hand-drawn character portraits remain unchanged, unfortunately, but understandably so. The pixel art even reacts to lights and shadows depending on where you are in the stage. It's really nice to have a game released as late as 2021 and still use newly produced and high-quality pixel art and animations. The presentation as a whole is pretty great. The story mode feels like some missed potential that I assume will only appeal to those who are already big fans of Tsukihime, while newcomers are left more confused than anything. But everything else, the character design, stages, and music, is at least a little above average, if not great, and it manages to form an identity of its own. I'm also a big fan of the heads-up display. All of the meters, health bar, and various other information are easy to read at a glance, and it looks good. I also love it when fighting games give real-time feedback and information on different moves and situations. It's something that Grand Blue Fantasy Versus does as well, and I wish Guilty Gear Strive would do this beyond simply saying counter and punish. I don't know, it's not a big deal, but it is something else that I really appreciate. Alright, enough about the dumb anime stuff. It's time to talk about the gameplay. It's a typical one-on-one fighting game with a focus on simple controls and high speed. The controls are thus: A, B, and C are your light, medium, and heavy attacks, while D is your dedicated shield button. Different combinations of buttons activate some universal abilities, like pressing A and D together to grab, but for the most part, it's all about those three attack buttons and a special shield button for defensive purposes. It's a very simple button layout that's easy to understand and get used to, although mastering the game itself will no doubt require a lot of practice. This game is fast as hell. Everyone's got a run speed that zooms them across the arena. Even the slowest characters here are way faster than an entire roster from most fighting games. It's a blazingly fast speed that's hard to get used to at first. But that being said, running and air dashing does feel pretty good. It's very responsive and easy to control once you've got a handle on it. Every character is able to double jump and air dash pretty freely, so you've got some good movement options as a baseline to work with, on top of the unique abilities that each character has. Similar to most of these anime fighting games, like Persona 4 Arena for example, Melty Blood features an air recovery mechanic to help prevent infinite combos. If a combo goes on for too long, then the opponent will backflip in midair and get right back into the fight. This means that learning optimal combos will take a lot of trial and error in training mode to learn what string of attacks will keep your opponent in a combo, and unlike Guilty Gear Strive for example, improvising a combo on the fly isn't going to work out because one wrong hit on a combo that's been going on for too long can prematurely end the whole thing, which is why you can rely on auto combos to help ensure that everything works out. Newly introduced to Type Lumina are two mechanics no doubt meant to help ease in new players. Rapid Beat is the auto combo system, and Moon Skills are input shortcuts for special moves. The way that Melty Blood works is that the A, B, and C attacks can all combo into each other and in any order. But if you press the same button a second time within a single sequence, it will automatically trigger a launcher and go into an air combo. It's a simple and easy way to link all of your hits, while the meat of the combo itself can be extended with command normals and special moves. Despite how simple the controls may seem, there's a surprising amount of depth to the combo system, and much of it seems based around giving the player a ton of options to work with in different situations. To use a simple example with Miyako for example, she has two similar forward-moving attacks, but one causes a wall bounce while the other doesn't, both of which can be very important for optimizing damage potential. Basically, the game is simple enough for most people to get into, but there's definitely enough depth here to allow for some really creative and cool combos. The Moon Skills allow for every character's special moves to be used with a simple direction and button input. This allows for some very sudden and rapid attacks that can take the opponent off guard, but there are some limitations. Moon Skills drain a character's moon gauge, so they can't be used infinitely, and they're often weaker than their main counterparts. Miyako's elbow drop isn't an overhead, and her rising kick isn't invulnerable. Still, the speed that these attacks come out can make them very useful in the neutral space, especially since they're usually safe on block, and it adds a little bit of additional depth to the game and more options for the player to use. It works well as both a special move shortcut for new players and as additional options for veterans. It's similar in a way to how Grand Blue Fantasy Versus does it, but I think I like the approach that Type Lumina goes with even more. Now I've got to talk about the shield mechanic, arguably Melty Blood's most defining and most hilarious feature. While you still have to rely on the traditional hold back to block like most fighting games, pressing the shield button while standing or crouching will allow you to block a high or low attack respectively, and then you can counterattack with a variety of options. Either a direct uppercut for an easy combo, a surprise attack teleport from behind, or a rapid lunge to help you escape the situation entirely. The hilarious part is that your opponent can immediately counter with a shield of their own, leading to an insane rock paper scissors match right out of an over-the-top anime fight. It's one of the funniest and craziest looking things I've seen in a fighting game. And the main thing that helps balance this out is that using the shield is a pretty committed action. Once you've pulled out your shield, you're stuck in place for a while and easily open to something as simple as a grab attack. The threat of a shield block occurring at any time and leading to an instant back and forth can make the game wildly chaotic. I don't want this to go on for too much longer, but I do want to bring up a couple of mechanics that I find pretty fascinating in this game. The moon gauge is your meter used for moon skills as well as your shield, but it can be spent all at once in order to enter your moon drive state. It reminds me a little bit of X Factor from Marvel vs. Capcom 3. The moon drive interrupts your current action with an instant cancel, allowing for new combo routes, or to save yourself if you've been left open. Furthermore, while under the state of moon drive, your special meter will regenerate on its own. Like most fighting games, your special meter is used for EX attack and super moves, but your remaining meter can be sacrificed at any time in order to enter the heat status. While your character is heated, you'll rapidly start regenerating your health, which can make a big difference in making a comeback. I find it pretty fascinating how these multiple meters can be used separately of each other, or in order to complement each other. It gives the player the potential to express themselves in their own ways. You can play it safe and store your meter just in case you need to regenerate your health later on, or you can forego the defensive capabilities of your shield and enter the moon drive state as soon as you get a combo going to help maximize your damage. It might sound like all of these mechanics are overwhelming and there's a lot to take in here, but everything does start to feel natural little by little as you continue playing the game. You can focus on your normals, auto combos, and one or two special commands to get by at first, and you'll do just fine. And the more you play, the more you'll find everything else start to fall into place naturally. This is helped very well by the game's tutorial, and thankfully the loading times are very fast. Anyone who's played through Guilty Gear Strive's mission mode knows how annoying it can be to switch characters. But Type Lumina has one of the absolute fastest load times I've ever seen in a fighting game. Anyway, the tutorial is a massive info dump that doesn't necessarily convey all of its information in the most elegant way, and I feel like some information isn't explained at all. For example, utilizing 3 wall bounces in a single combo will instantly nullify any further hits and force the combo to drop. It took me a while to figure that one out, but for the most part, it is a very good tutorial, and it's complemented by a great combo challenge too. This doesn't come anywhere near the difficulty of insane combo challenges of past games, like from Marvel vs. Capcom 3, Persona 4 Arena, Guilty Gear Xrd, and so on, but it is a huge step up from Guilty Gear Strive. It's a great way to get started on learning a character's potential, but you'll definitely need to figure out the best stuff on your own. Finally, there's the online mode. It uses the tried and true ranked and unranked matchmaking for either serious or casual play. You can spend time in training mode while the game searches for your opponent, and the netcode is good. From my experience, it seemed like 1 out of every 20 or so opponents will have a totally garbage connection that borders on unplayable. But for the most part, it runs quite well. You're given the option to see who your opponent is before committing to a fight, which takes away from the spirit of ranked matchmaking, but otherwise it still works well, and I rarely had a hard time finding a match. Good to see that 2 years later, Type Lumina on PlayStation 4 still has a pretty good audience online. While the rollback netcode is very welcome, the lack of crossplay is extremely disappointing. But hey, at least it works, which is more than I can say for Grand Blue's netcode. While beating people up online is always fun, I feel like I should mention that almost everyone I fought ranked B or lower didn't seem that great at the game, while the A ranks were a bit more formidable. Going up against someone that actually knows how to play the game really opened my eyes to the direction that Type Lumina is going for. It actually reminds me a lot like Marvel vs. Capcom 3 in terms of pressure and ambiguous mix-ups. While ending your air combo with a hard knockdown instead of a more powerful EX attack can leave a lot of damage on the table, getting that opportunity to continue pressuring the opponent and preventing them from returning to neutral is invaluable. Because of this, I find that auto combos are a little too powerful. If you manage to poke your opponent from afar and have it lead into an auto combo, then you've got your hard knockdown and Oki pressure right there, on top of that easy damage. Most characters do have an invincible reversal, and you can always take a bigger guess by bringing out your shield, but the player on defense ultimately has a miserable time. Furthermore, there's no advancing guard or faultless defense, anything to help create space while you're blocking. You really just gotta sit there and figure out an opening or make a good read with the shield, which itself easily leads to a mad scramble rock paper scissors match. I think that, just like Marvel vs. Capcom 3, Type Lumina can be very fun at a casual level and extremely stressful at the higher levels of play. It's a ton of chaos no matter what. Well, that's about all I have to say. I do also want to bring up that the game originally launched with 13 characters in its initial roster, and since then an additional 8 characters have released, all as free DLC, and each with their own unique and creative gimmicks. Having a total roster size of 21 characters is pretty good, and not having to worry about DLC in a fighting game is always a nice bonus. I do wish that the story mode could have been better handled, and little quality of life features like a preview video showcasing every character's special moves in their command list would have been really nice, but for the most part, this is a very competent fighting game. I like the presentation, it controls well, the online is good, and it's just a fun game. The simple controls and fast pace make it easy for beginners to get into, but there's enough depth to it for more hardcore players, and the combo potential I've seen from my limited time with the game seems really cool. I do prefer Guilty Gear Strive a lot more, but Type Lumina turned out to be a pleasant surprise that I find a lot of fun. Thanks for watching my review on Melty Blood Type Lumina.